What is up, YouTube? I'm Devon DaVinci, leader of the Renaissance crew, and you're watching DaVinci Reacts. Today I have another extra credit reaction for you guys, or their series, Extra History. And this is, of course, Suleiman the Magnificent. I told you guys I was going to do a video about Suleiman, so what better way than to go to one of my go-to, I know I said that a lot, to go to one of my go-to YouTube content creators, and that is Extra Credit. They always do very fun animations, and they're very good at making expressions, like I said before. So I like watching their videos. Now, before I get into this, I do want to say, if you haven't seen Extra Credit's channel, please go check it out. Please go check it out. I was just going through their video list, and I was looking for the Suleiman video, and it's very far down there. This video was made back in 2016, so I was scrolling for a minute. And I was just going past all the videos that they made, and it was just like, wow, that is an amazing topic. Wow, that's an amazing topic. Wow, I didn't know they did a video about the subject. Like, it was just over and over again. So if you want to look up any particular moment in history that's like prominent, check out their channel, because chances are you will find something that relates to the moment that you are thinking of. So with that being said, I do want to check this out. The original link for the video is in the description box down below. If you haven't seen the original before you watch my reaction, please go do so right now. That way you can show the original content creator support, and they can continue to make videos because they're making money off of them. If you're just watching my video, the original content creator doesn't really get anything out of it. So with that being said, let's jump into this and see what it has to offer.
A man stands on the banks of the Bosphorus, watching the flow of its waters. The past echoes through him. He had once heard of a great emperor of the Romans, a lawgiver, a conqueror, a defender of the faith, a builder of temples to exalt himself and his god, a man who married a courtesan and shared with her a glorious reign, an emperor who dreamed of an empire that stretched to the farthest horizons. Was not he, Suleiman, also all of these things? But where was that dreamer's empire now? It was
Suleiman,
underneath his feet. Did he not stand in that man's beloved city? Had that man's great cathedral not been converted into his mosque? Would this Ottoman Empire too one day end up as ghosts of the past, as stories and as monuments? He was not sleeping well. His mind had been troubled of late.
That is the fate of every
the counsel of his
empire.
old friend Ibrahim. Standing on the banks of the Bosphorus, he remembers.
Dun dun. Dun dun dun.
He remembers the swift rider, the man on the tall horse who came to Manisa to tell him that his father was dead. He had considered this moment time and again, yet now that it was here, he didn't know how to feel. His father was Salim the Stern, capable, ruthless, arrogant, a terror to his advisors, with the slightest misstep meaning execution. But he'd also been a boon to the empire, pushing its borders further than any sultan before him. In the reckoning of the West, it was 1520, but to him it was the year 925. He was 25 years old, born in 900, and he was about to become the 10th sultan, born at the very beginning of the 10th century, an auspicious sign. He called for Ibrahim, his childhood friend, a Greek, a Christian, and a slave. They would take the fastest horses to Istanbul, where his father's death was being kept a secret, lest rebellion occur in the absence of a ruling sultan. As they thundered down the dusty roads of Anatolia, he had time to think of his nation.
Don't forget,
and his
Istanbul
future.
was
At
Constantinople.
least there would be no civil war. His father had spared him and the empire that when he murdered all of his brothers. His reign would at least start in peace. For 8 days they rode hard, and for 8 days he planned. He discussed with Ibrahim how they would lay the foundation for his rule, and how together they would navigate the Byzantine waters of Istanbul. Then they arrived. He was back in the shining city, the sublime gate. Within moments, he was surrounded by guards and functionaries. Barely off his horse, he was led to the tomb of Eyüp, the burial place of Muhammad's standard-bearer, and perhaps the most sacred site in all of Istanbul. Then came in the Mevlevi Sharif, who walked up to him and, about his waist, girt the golden sword of Osman. And so he was tied to the prophet and to the founder of his house, and he was made sultan. With the rising of the sun the next day, he received the highest officials in the palace to pay him homage. Then he followed his father's bier to his final resting place, and there he decreed, as his first act as sultan, that a mosque should be built around his father's grave. He would honor his father. He would remind the world of the strength of his house. But he would also show them that he was his own man. The fear that they knew under his father would not persist. He gave a large donative to the Janissary Corps, that elite infantry that formed the backbone of the Sultan's armies.
I want to believe that Suleiman was a benevolent leader, somebody that was nicer and not as bloodthirsty as some of the other conquerors throughout history, but at the same time, the dude expanded the Ottoman Empire very far, so can you be benevolent while expanding an empire like that? Is that possible? I don't know. It is funny. Somebody made a comment in one of my other videos. They said, do you get all your history information from the Bill Wirtz video? And I was like, not necessarily, but it is a good reference point. Like, for example, I didn't know who Suleiman was until that video. And it didn't go into a lot of detail, so I never really pretended like I knew exactly who he was. But based on how the video was made, I imagine he has something to do with the Ottoman Empire. So I might not know anything about it, but the video was a reference point to know where to look if I wanted to find out more. Like, if you want to know more about the Ottoman Empire, check out Suleiman. That's a good place to look. And now I hear about his father, who also was the person that probably initiated the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. Now there's another person to look up.
And served as his personal guard. But he gave to the officials and the functionaries as well. He pardoned some, allowed those who his father had compelled by force to come to Istanbul to return to their homes, lifted a much-hated prescription against the sale of Iranian goods. Everyone would know.
Also, just a quick pause. I'm going to go back a little bit, but I know this next question could be controversial and cause like a really big, heated debate in the comment section. And I just know, try to keep it civil. But I'm just asking this out of just general curiosity. What empire would you say best represents the Ottoman Empire? Because based on what I'm guessing, it's the Turks, right? Like, which people were the ones responsible for the Ottoman Empire? I'm thinking it's Turkey. Again, keep it civil, because sometimes when it comes to things like this, people want to, take credit. So they start attacking anybody that tries to claim otherwise. But this is coming from somebody that knows nothing about it. I would like to know who if I wanted to know the origins of the Ottoman Empire, where would I go? Because again, I'm imagining it's Turkey.
Lifted a much-hated prescription against the sale of Iranian goods. Everyone would know. It was a new era. But as he had discussed with Ibrahim, he could not let his new benevolence be mistaken for weakness. And so the executions began. Oof. Not many, and none he believed to be unjust. Just enough to let those in the court know that the House of Osman was still ruled by a tiger, and not a lamb. But his rule wouldn't go unchallenged. Barely had he taken the sword when revolt erupted in Syria. The governor of Syria marched on Aleppo, thinking he had the support of the Bey, or governor of Egypt, a province newly added to the empire under Suleiman's father Salim. But the Bey of Egypt was a crafty man, and instead sent word to the Sultan of what was going on, all the while plotting to support whoever won the conflict, and to claim he'd supported them all along. But Suleiman saw in this opportunity as much as danger. He marshaled his armies and marched with overwhelming force to crush the revolt in the south. He showed the entire Islamic world that he was not a man to be trifled with, that his armies were as vast as the sea, and his resolve as uncompromising. He would be benevolent to the loyal,
you picked the right
and
one.
Merciless where disloyalty met him. Perhaps that's where it all began. He shakes his head and walks along the shore. And then a smile touches his lips, remembering those first heady days, planning with Ibrahim. With his southern territories secure, he could start planning his real dream. Where his father had expanded south, he would bring the empire north, into Europe. Late into the night, he would pore over maps with Ibrahim, who was now falconer to the Sultan. They would discuss in depth the powers of Europe, but their conversations always returned to 2 points: Belgrade and Rhodes. After the fall of the Byzantines, the Kingdom of Hungary alone stood as the bulwark of Europe, preventing Ottoman expansion north and west. And Belgrade stood as the gate to that bulwark. If Belgrade fell, the path to Eastern Europe would lay wide open for the armies of the Sultan. But Belgrade also served as a reminder of a national shame. In 1456, the Ottomans had tried to take the great fortress at Belgrade, only to suffer a complete and humiliating defeat. The Christians in Europe still struck their bells at noon to celebrate such a triumph, mocking the great empire to the east with each peal. He, Suleiman, would undo this shame, and in doing so, open the way to Europe. But there was another thorn in his empire: roads. The eastern Mediterranean should be an Ottoman lake, with commerce and transport flowing freely and safely through its waters. But with the Knights of Rhodes doggedly holding on to the island in its center, serving as a harbor and a safe haven for Christian corsairs, his people would never know peace on the sea. His trade, especially the all-important trade from Egypt, was threatened, and naval campaigns to the west were severely hampered by this Christian fortress clinging to a rock in his sea. For 75 years, sultans had tried to wrest control of this tiny island from the Christians, and each time they'd been repulsed. But where they had failed,
If only you
he
had
must
nukes.
succeed. His dream of a European empire could never be realized without control of this strategic island. But even as he planned, the war he desired came to him. The Kingdom of Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, despite continuous border raids, were theoretically at peace, but the terms of this peace involved an annual tribute to the Sultanate. This year, upon hearing of a new sultan in the empire, instead of sending tribute, the brash Hungarian prince had the Ottoman envoy executed. Suleiman was furious. He had surprised everyone in court, all the foreign dignitaries, with his gentler rule. He had shown that he wasn't weak, but from this thin, pale lover of poetry and music, this tame lion as they all thought of him, they hadn't yet seen wrath. Well, now they would see it. Now Hungary would see it. Now the world would see the Sultan's rage. Raise the horsetail banners. No one executes his citizens. No one insults his dignity. The empire is going to war. Quietly, looking out at the waves, he remembered the secret feeling of elation that had come with his anger. His mind started to drift to war to come.
Okay, I will be continuing the Suleiman series, so this is part 1. I don't know exactly how far to stretch. Usually these things go for about 4 episodes, so I will be continuing to check these out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think it's possible for an empire to be ruled by someone and at the same time that person be like benevolent or always looking for the passive option. It just doesn't happen. Maybe it can happen nowadays because it seems like if a country wanted to expand, they would have to do it diplomatically as opposed to militarily. So I guess technically you could have a benevolent leader that takes up a lot of space. But back in these days in particular, no. It was all about military conquest, plain and simple. Now, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share. Again, be sure to check out Extra Credits channel. They also have a Patreon. I'm not sure what the Patreon offers, but if you go to the original video and look in their description box, I'm sure there's an explanation for what their Patreon has to offer. So if that interests you, go and check it out. I am Devon DaVinci. Hopefully you've just been a little bit more enlightened. I certainly have. I look forward to seeing you guys on a future video. But until then, I'm going to give you the deuces, and I'm signing out. Deuces.